Welcome to Off Top. My name is Dylan Wilson, and today we are finally ending the debate of who's better between Dak Prescott and Carson Wentz. But before we get started, I want you all to go ahead and grab something to drink, take a seat, get comfortable, because this won't be one of those low-effort clickbait videos that everyone's putting out now. Nah, we are actually going to sit down and take the time to cover everything about these two quarterbacks, from their production to injury history, leadership, their overall potential, and so much more. And then, at the end of the video, we'll circle back around and do a checklist of everything we covered. And then we'll finally decide once and for all who's really better. So to start us off, let's pull up their career numbers. And right off the bat, that's a clean sweep for Dak. He's got more yards, more touchdowns, a higher completion percentage, better yards per attempt, less fumbles, a higher passer rating, better win percentage, and the same amount of interceptions in 7 more games. But right about now, the argument that typically gets made for Wentz is, yeah, he's missed some games, but he's better when he's actually on the field. So accumulative stats don't do him justice. Okay, then let's take a look at the per game stats and find out if that theory holds true. The numbers look a lot closer now, but Dak still accounts for more touchdowns, less interceptions, and less fumbles. Wentz only accounts for more yards per game. 4, basically just a completion, which could be looked at as an indictment against Wentz considering Dak was operating within a run-first offense and still outperformed them. Nevertheless, the stats have told us Dak is better, or at the very least, more productive. But the general consensus is Dak is average and Wentz is the future of the league. But why does that narrative exist? Being the quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys and having everybody trying to minimize their accomplishments may have something to do with it. Wentz being the number 2 overall pick may have something else to do with it. But I believe it's largely due to this 15-game stretch for Dak and the overreaction that surrounded it. And as you see, his production dropped off in every single category and he looked average at best during this stretch. But was this a sophomore slump or something else? It all started with Zeke's suspension. The low-hanging fruit at the time was to say Dak was only good because of Zeke. The problem with that was, without Zeke, what other weapons did Dak have? Dez Bryant, Jason Witten, Terrence Williams? At that point, all 3 of them struggled to get open, and they were easily taken away because defenses no longer had to respect the run. All 3 of them were even off the team the next year. But the situation still didn't get any better for Dak the following year. The replacements were Allen Hurns, Deontay Thompson, and Jeff Swain. Not exactly offensive juggernauts. It also didn't help that Tyrel battled back injuries and Chaz Green was terrible as his replacement. You remember the 5 sacks he gave up in Atlanta. Then the next year, Travis Frederick missed the season with Guillain-Barré syndrome. And those were brutal losses, considering Dallas allocated much of their salary cap to the offensive line instead of weapons for Dak. You see what I'm saying? So yes, if you suspend his only weapon, fail to give him anybody to throw to, let the strength of the team become a liability, and don't do him any favors with the predictable play calling, your QB is going to struggle. But of course, people took that as Dak needing everything around him to be perfect in order to be successful, instead of just acknowledging that his failures came when he had nothing. I mean, all it took was getting one wide receiver for Dak to turn everything around, and then some. Since the Amari trade, Dak accounts for 80 more yards and another touchdown per game. He has less interceptions and less fumbles, improved his completion percentage by 8%, throws for an extra 1.5 yards per attempt, increases passer rating by 22 points, and is winning 22% more of his games. That is insane. And the numbers he's putting up this year are proving that wasn't a fluke. Through 7 games, Dak has been better than Wentz in every category except interceptions. Even then, 2 of them bounced off the hands of his receivers. One of them was a Hail Mary, and another was blatant pass interference. Dak really only has 3 interceptions, and 2 of them were heat checks. In fact, of Dak's 32 career interceptions, 12 of them bounced off his receiver. Oh, and just for fun, I have one more category for y'all to digest. Let's check the stats to see who's been more clutch in their career. So, in the fourth quarter and overtime, Dak has a much better passer rating, a far greater total touchdown to interception ratio, a higher completion percentage, more yards per attempt, almost twice as many game-winning drives, and 10 more fourth-quarter comebacks. I mean, Dak has 4 game-winning drives against the Eagles alone. Wentz has 5 in his whole career. It's not even close who's been the better clutch performer. So, now that I've shown you the numbers, let's talk about the teams around them. The common excuse for Dak's production is exactly that. So let's take a look at all these weapons Dak has had over his career. We'll start with Zeke. It should be noted that since his suspension, he's lost a lot of his explosiveness and goes down a lot easier than he used to. He isn't the home run hitter he used to be. For example, Zeke and Saquon had the exact same amount of 30 or more yard runs in their careers, and Saquon has played in 27 less games. There was once a point you could make the argument Zeke was the MVP of the team and of the league, but that hasn't realistically been the case since his rookie year. And if you subscribe to the theory that Zeke is only good because of the offensive line, you aren't allowed to use Zeke to further your agenda against Dak. It's self-explanatory. Dez, he was out of his prime and struggled getting open when Dak took over. And just the type of quarterback Dak is, he spreads the ball around to the open man. Dez was a jump ball receiver and a bad scheme fit from the very start. Dak was never going to force the ball to him, whether he could still go up and get it or not. And if you were a part of the Dez is overrated, Dez can't catch, or Dez is wash crowds, you're obviously disqualified from using them to discredit Dak. Amari, my only complaint about him are his drops. Other than that, I have nothing negative to say. But if you're trying to use him to punch holes in Dak's career numbers, it should be noted they've only played 15 out of 54 games together. Michael Gallup is also legit. The only knocks on him are, again, drops and playing time, and also the time it took to develop that chemistry with Dak. But he's going to be very good in the near future. Cole Beasley, though, he was overrated. He was a limited slot receiver that was only good for underneath routes. He shrunk the field with his lack of downfield ability and was easy to scheme out of games when defenses didn't have to key in on better players. Dallas did themselves a lot of favors letting him walk, and now you see a lot of what they were missing with the seam routes this year. Terrence Williams was also completely overrated. He was a body catcher with a catch radius of a couch pillow. Not only that, but he was notorious for disappearing and going without a catch for multiple games on end. And what I'm about to tell you will sound made up, but I promise you it's not. But in 2017, because of the passes he dropped into the air for pick sixes, Terrence Williams accounted for more defensive touchdowns than offensive. I'm telling you, this man was trash. He had a couple big moments in Dallas, but he was mostly terrible. Michael Gallup is already a huge upgrade. Jason Witten is obviously one of the all-time greats. But in years 14 and 15, he was out of his prime and wasn't a downfield threat for Dak. He also retired for the entire 2018 season. But to his credit, he's back now and looking the best he's had in years. But is he better than Ertz or Goddard? Nah. Now fans, players, and media alike have all criticized the predictable play calling. Scott Linehan did Dak no favors running slants and curls all day, and all from the same spots with no pre-snap motion or play action. Jason Garrett has also been labeled a clapping puppet. Tony Romo even said he isn't an X's and O's guy. Dak deserves all the credit in the world for winning as many games as he did without any help from his coaches. It wasn't until this year with Kellen Moore that Dak seen some creativity with the play calling. It's not a coincidence that once they started running a modern NFL offense, that Dak became an MVP candidate. And that brings us to Wentz's weapons. Before the season, Philly was hyped as having the best receiving core, the best tight ends, the best offensive line, the top running back core, etc., etc., etc. Eagles fans were pointing to that as one of the many reasons why they were better than Dallas and would win the East. If they were to backtrack that now, I imagine it would be because of all the drops. But you know what other team drops a lot of passes? The Cowboys. Even more so than the Eagles. Even so, Dak still completes 71% of his attempts. Can you imagine what his numbers would look like if they weren't dropping all those passes? And while we're here, what's the excuse for Wentz only having a 61% completion percentage? Does he need everything around him to be perfect in order to be successful? They can't even say it's because Dak is dinking and dunking either. He's averaging 2 more yards per attempt and has a higher yards per attempt over his career as well. That's not Dakin and dunking. That's Dakin and diming. But maybe Wentz is just better because he's more valuable to his team. We've all heard them say he's capable of carrying a team and Dak isn't. But all I know is without Dak in 2015, the Cowboys went 4-12. With nearly the exact same team the next year, Dak and the Cowboys went 13-3. Let's compare that to Wentz's MVP season. Before he got hurt, they went 11-2. And that's impressive. But then Foles stepped in and went 5-1 and carried them through the playoffs and won Super Bowl MVP. Not only that, but he looked better in big games than Wentz ever did. So how are you the most valuable player when your team can lose you and not even need you to win the freaking Super Bowl? If you take Dak off the Cowboys, they're getting another top 10 pick. The argument can be made that if Wentz didn't get hurt, they never would have won the championship in the first place. So how exactly is that valuable? The very next year when Wentz was playing them out of playoff contention, Foles stepped in and saved them again. They weren't making shrines or statues for Wentz when Foles was leading them back to the playoffs. He was a drop pass interception away from returning to the NFC Championship. So how are you carrying your team when your team plays better without you? And it's not an exaggeration to say they play better without him. Sources inside the Eagles agree with me. Just listen to these quotes. While the sentiment inside the Eagles locker room is that Foles is universally loved, Wentz isn't. His all-shucks, overgrown Opie from Mayberry routine plays well with the local and national media, but the true Wentz is far more nuanced and complicated, with sources describing him as selfish, uncompromising, egotistical, one who plays favorites and doesn't like to be questioned, one who needs to practice what he preaches and fails to take accountability. Numerous sources confirm Wentz was once verbally attacked by a highly respected teammate for not being a team guy. Carson Wentz's biggest enemy is Carson Wentz, one source said. He sometimes acts like he's won 10 Super Bowls when he hasn't played in, let alone won a playoff game yet. Everyone around him wants good things for him, but he did more thinking on the field than he did playing. You don't have to be a brain surgeon or a football expert to see how differently this team plays and reacts with one guy as opposed to the other. According to multiple sources, Wentz tended to complicate the offense. He didn't let it come organically as Foles did. According to one source, Wentz could complicate 2 + 2. Aggravation came in knowing that if Wentz was the more dominant player, why wouldn't the offense be even more prolific with him running it than Foles? The glaring difference is that Foles would go through progressions within the offense exactly how it was designed to run and hit the open receiver regardless of who it was or where they were on the field. Wentz only saw, it seemed, one receiver the majority of the season, Zach Ertz. This understandably frustrated the rest of the offense considering other receivers were open downfield. The offensive players primarily felt more comfortable and confident with Foles because they knew he would get everyone involved in the offense. Foles would check down if he had to, but he wasn't going to audible out of running plays as Wentz had a tendency to do. Wentz also had a propensity to pull the ball when he was about to hand off to the running backs and check down to Ertz, despite having one of the NFL's better offensive lines to run behind. It would frustrate the offensive line, the running backs, the wide receivers, basically everyone on the field at the time, with the exception of Wentz and Ertz. Wentz also struggled reading defenses this season according to sources. His eyes were all over the place. Consequently, his scope of the field was far narrower. He pressed. Going into games, the running backs and wide receivers would openly question how many touches they would get because they felt Wentz wouldn't look their way. The offensive linemen grew angry because Wentz's indecision would cause them to hold the ball longer than necessary, resulting in sacks and hits. And it's all starting to make sense now.
Take him out. Good protection this time, and now Wentz looking around, and there's just nobody down there open. He gets rid of it.
Where have I seen this before?
Deuce right, 89 fly on 2. Ready? Break.
Here comes the blitz, and no one's blocking. And Crew will be sacked for a big loss. That looked like a message to Crew from his offensive line.
After a particularly biting loss in November, there was an awkward moment. Peterson asked one of the more prominent offensive players to define what accountability means. So fed up with his limited role under Wentz, the player said nothing. He checked out. He has to return to who Carson Wentz is, a source told PhillyVoice. That comes with relaxing and not forcing things. It also comes with being able to take constructive criticism. He has to learn that it's not always about him, and that's partly what hurt this team this year. We know what type of player he can be and who he normally is. He needs to realize it's the Philadelphia Eagles and not the Philadelphia Carsons. A little humility goes a long way. I'll link the full article down in the description. If you're hoping to make the case that that was last year and this is this year, Alshon Jeffrey and Malcolm Jenkins have already been outed and saying the exact same things again this year. Now let's compare all that to the types of things you hear about Dak and his leadership.
I will tell you, he's as fine a person as there is in our game right now, and he's unbelievable in terms of his character, his personality, his leadership abilities, all the intangibles. This guy's got it in spades. And then he has a work ethic that's second to none, and that's been apparent this year in the work he put in this offseason.
Line one for him, I think, is he has the respect of everybody in that locker room. I mean, he's the true leader, and that's not the case. I mean, there's 52 other guys and certainly support staff and coaches that would run through a wall for him, and that's important, especially at the quarterback position. And he really defines what you want out of QB1. Hardworking, dependable, great leader, and he's comfortable with his system. He's in command. His ability to get to all the different checks, his velocity of throws, being aligned with Kellen Moore, the new young coordinator. I just think he's done all that at a high level, and that's why he's had that success.
Eagles fans will probably try to say Wentz was forcing things due to injury, but at some point we have to stop rewarding hypotheticals. Even if Wentz hadn't missed any games, Dak would still have more wins and better numbers. The per-game stats back that up. Wentz is 100% healthy right now when Dak's been better. And if injuries were the reason Wentz was making bad reads, forcing bad throws, and showing bad leadership, Eagles fans may have to accept that's just who he really is. Because if that's who he reverts to when he gets hurt, that's who he'll always be because he's injury prone. Dating back to 2015, Wentz has broken something new every year. We have no reason to believe he won't keep getting hurt. The only injury Dak has sustained was an elbow sprain all the way back in 2013. So with the best ability is availability, Dak has proven to have a lot more ability than Wentz. And ability leads us to the word potential. Who has more potential? We've been hearing about Wentz and all his arm talent, but what does that even mean? We've seen Wentz peak in 2017, while Dak just keeps getting better. It's been said all along that Dak needs to improve his downfield accuracy, footwork, and release time. To Wentz's credit, he was already pretty solid in those areas. So if you agree Dak had more areas to improve in as a passer, then by default, don't you agree he has more potential? Because what would happen if Dak improved in those areas? He already had better production than Wentz on a run-first offense. Could you imagine what his numbers would look like if he improved as a passer? Dak would be better than Wentz and it wouldn't even be close. And so far this season, you're starting to see that because he's been doing just that, refining his weaknesses. Here's Chris Sims talking about Dak's improved throwing motion.
Dak has always been a real, like that kind of thrower, and you've heard me say that. That's hard. He can get away with it.
Yeah.
Even Cam Newton gets away with that a little bit. Why? Because they're just big, strong individuals.
Talking about, a little too much over the top.
A little too much over the top. It's just not flowing. It's herky-jerky.
Right.
It's just it's not like we see Brady and Rodgers, who just looks like, oh, man. That was effortless, and that was 40 yards he threw that? It looked like he was throwing it 5 yards.
Right.
When Dak Prescott does it at times, you were like, damn, he threw that ball like he was going to throw it 50 yards, but it was really 10 yards he threw it because it was such a high-effort throw. It was so, and his front leg would locked out. I don't know who got in his ear, but his throwing motion on Sunday, 99% or 90% of the time, was a cross. I mean, it really was. And where it really helped him was he ran the zone read or an RPO, and then when the slant was coming, he told the ball, and it was just, it was like whoa, the ball flew out of his hand just effortlessly. And it wasn't like this, let me do this, and then, where I give the defense also an extra read because my motion was so long and herky-jerky and what do I want to say, obvious, that now the safety saw it all the way. When you do it like that, where you just zoom and zoom like that, man, you're giving your receiver that little split second that might be the difference of him making a guy miss. And now instead of a 10-yard gain, he made that guy miss and got 40 yards.
And here's Troy Aikman talking about Dak's improved footwork and release time.
So the question was, okay, he has all these qualities, but we need to see more within the passing game, and he's done that. I mean, I think he's been extremely impressive, not just because the numbers show that, but when I watch him, this is a different guy. And yeah, maybe it started to come on towards the second half of last season when they got Amari Cooper, but his footwork and his timing of getting the ball out, this is a different guy than we saw at any point last year.
So if the potential argument no longer favors Wentz, then what exactly does he have over Dak? Let's go through the checklist and finally find out. But to start, it's definitely not production. The numbers favor Dak no matter which way you want to look at them. That's a check for Dak. Next, durability clearly goes to Dak. One is injury prone, the other isn't. Another check. So far in his career, Wentz has been pretty bad in the clutch, or at least compared to Dak. That's another category Dak easily takes. Who's more valuable to their team? If your team can lose you and get better and win the Super Bowl without you, it's definitely not you. Dak takes this one as well. Now, who's done more with less? Going into the year, all the talk around the Eagles was all the weapons they had and how their roster was the deepest in the NFL. If you want to make the case their supporting cast are about equal now, well, then Dak has been great and Wentz hasn't, in which case Dak has done more with the same, so another check that goes to Dak. If we're talking leadership, Wentz doesn't hold a candle. Many of his teammates have criticized him and still prefer Foles over him. Every single player in the Cowboys locker room loves Dak and would run through a wall for him. Again, Dak takes another category. Dak was already better than Wentz when he was unrefined from the pocket. Now that that's no longer the case, there's not much of a debate. Wentz hit his ceiling and Dak is only scratching his. Dak has more potential. And just like we started, Dak ends the video with a clean sweep. So let's officially answer the question. Dak Prescott or Carson Wentz? Who is really better? The answer is obviously Dak Prescott. That doesn't mean Carson Wentz is a bad quarterback. In fact, I actually believe he's really good. He's just not better than Dak. And I hate to break it to you, but you Eagles fans are in for a lot of this as long as Dak's at quarterback.
So sad that some fans could barely keep it together.
We answered, I talked stuff, I thought we had it, but it goes to show you who's a better team, and I'm sticking Cowboys.
You're crying.
I'm hurt. I love my Eagles. I don't believe this.
You gonna flap the hat one more time for the Eagles for the hard fight they did?
Let's go Birds, fly, Eagles fly. Still Super Bowl chance for now.
In all seriousness, though, I hope you all enjoyed the very first episode of Off Top. I made the logos, overlays, intro, outro, everything from scratch. I love this stuff, so you can expect a lot more videos in the near future covering a wide array of topics. I love football, basketball, rap, movies, anime, video games, wrestling, Star Wars, horror, all that. So if any of that is of interest to you and you like what you saw here today, why not go ahead and subscribe? Whether we're talking trash with or to each other, it's all in good fun. Again, my name is Dylan Wilson, and thank you to everyone who took the time to watch. I truly, truly appreciate it. Peace.